Good evening. Welcome to The Next Word. I'm your host, Chris Warnke, and tonight we're going to talk about the Middle East. We have two special guests. We have Lena, Alfi, who is the director of the Middle East Children's Institute, as well as Ambassador Patrick Theros, who spent 35 years of his diplomatic career partly in the Middle East. And what a career you had, Patrick.
Thank you very much. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you both, but thank you. I mean, you really did. When you came back, your last post was ambassador to Qatar.
Correct.
And you made quite an impression and came back and are still working on it.
Still working on it. Still, as you know, I run the U.S. Qatar Business Council. Right. And something I was really very happy to do. It is one of the more progressive states in the Arab world, despite the appearances. And how can I say? It's hard to say, but it's a part of the world that Americans don't know very well, and I wish we'd get to know better.
And it's really true. Yeah. I looked over your bio, because I can remember all the things you've done. But I forgot you were the deputy director of the counterterrorism?
Yes, yeah. Office in the Department of State.
Department of State.
Right.
Which is a huge role. Now, that was when, though?
That was 93 to 95.
93 to 95. Things have changed.
Things have changed.
Dramatically.
Yeah, clearly we failed because there's still terrorism after I left the job.
Right. But, I mean, things have changed. So, was that the only office that covered counterterrorism, other than, of course, the CIA?
No, the time the way the U.S. government was organized was that the State Department was responsible for the coordination of all U.S. counterterrorism activities outside the United States.
Really?
And the FBI was responsible for the coordination of all counterterrorism activities inside the United States.
But the State Department?
The State Department was. So within the State Department, within the Secretary of State's office, there was a special office that was called the Coordinator for Counterterrorism. I was the deputy coordinator. And our job, we had presidential authority where we could call up resources from any other agency of government, the Defense Department, Energy Department, the agency. So we were the ones coordinating counterterrorism work abroad. And the FBI did something corresponding domestically. Now, for example, we would provide resources to the FBI for domestic counterterrorism work, and they would provide resources to us for international counterterrorism work.
So before 9/11, a lot of the activity was out of the State Department.
That's correct.
Post 9/11, everything changed.
Yeah. First of all, the amount of resources dedicated to it has increased 1,000-fold.
1,000-fold, right.
Yeah.
Right.
The amount of money and everything involved has just grown geometrically. There's no comparison between the effort being made today and the effort being made then.
Oh, it's huge. And every agency in some shape, way, or form has some jurisdiction over some aspect, correct? Of
and there's now the FBI and the CIA both have counterterrorism fusion centers. And it gets sometimes, it is not necessarily a cleaner organization than we had then, but it's a much larger one with thousands of people involved. I mean, my office, total number of people in my office at the time was 14.
Wow. Really?
Really, yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and people thought we were overstaffed.
And they thought you were overstaffed. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? That's considering what's happened today.
And since then, yeah.
So I know you've spent time in Syria, but I'm going to turn to Lena and running this incredible nonprofit for children.
It's called the Middle East Children's Institute.
Right, right. And I noticed that Richard Gere is on your board, and you have some other notables.
As an international advisor, but yes, we have a wonderful list of international advisors, and actually a quite small and strong board that we have here in D.C., New York, and Texas. Yes.
And Texas.
And Texas, yeah.
It's relatively small. But
it is a small, yes. We are a small organization, but our model really, we have 200 staff on the ground in the Middle East. So our model really is to hire and train and empower locals to carry out programs and keep sort of the organizational staff very small. So we have a small base here in Washington and a small base in Switzerland.
In Switzerland?
Yeah.
Interesting. And you focus, of course, I know, you focus on the West Bank.
Yes, we started focusing on the West Bank. The mission of the organization really is to educate children who are impacted by conflict. And of course, you have to approach that in a much more delicate way. And so the organization started in 2005 and went into the West Bank really to use, try to come up with a prototype of how to create a model that's effective for children impacted by conflict. And so we started in a small village in the West Bank and in a small elementary girls' school, and it has now expanded to 4 schools there, and we work with a wonderful community. And the purpose really, we went in and tried to see what the needs were, and the needs were really that children didn't have any outlets for self-expression, didn't have any arts activities, sports activities, drama, all those wonderful things that we have in schools here that, you know, we really take for granted, because there it was just classes, and the school day ends at 12 o'clock, and then it's it.
That's it.
And so we created a really comprehensive after-school program where children had remedial support, but they also were able to express themselves and express the tensions that they were feeling in their environments every day, through art, through music clubs, through drama clubs, through chess clubs, through environmental awareness clubs, where children could really find their talents.
And God only knows it's so needed.
It is very needed.
All over. What's happening? It breaks my heart every time I see an article, and I see a child, and I say, "Oh, in Syria."
I know.
It's just devastating. But so you tell me about you, because you have an interesting career as well. You're young, and but you're doing incredible, impactful
Thank you.
things.
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, to a Syrian mother and an Egyptian father, and grew up very much as a sort of valley girl in LA, but also spending every summer and as much free time and vacation as we had in the Middle East. So I really was blessed. I grew up in this sort of dual world and feeling very much American and feeling very close to the lovely culture that comes out of the Middle East. And so I feel very deeply rooted there as well. And, you know, grew up in a household where with immigrant parents who were doing wonderful things and encouraging us to pursue our education, and went to USC and then came and did a master's here in DC, and you know, they really pushed us to embrace the values that America has and really try to also keep our roots in the Middle East, and I think we were able to do that really well. Yeah.
That's what you're doing. So you go back?
Yeah, I go back very often. I go to Egypt more often. Was going to Syria every year of my life until right before 2010 was the last time I was there. But yeah, I do go back often, and I feel very grateful that I can, and feel very grateful that I feel at home in multiple places in the world.
Which is wonderful. And Patrick, you know, so Syria and what's happened with the refugee crisis, and truly I don't think people really understand what's happening in terms of the countries that have taken in the refugees. Let's take Greece, for example. You know, I just came back. You know Greece. I mean, people here, we don't have an appreciation here of truly what is going on in the ground.
One of the things that people don't understand is that, and this is the greatest tragedy, this whole refugee issue is a tragedy. The greatest element of tragedy is that this is the best of the societies that are fleeing. I talked to my relatives on Chios, which is one of the islands facing the Turkish coast, which has gotten, after Lesbos, gotten the largest number of refugees, and they told me, these are really good people. These are very, very fine people. They're educated, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're anything you can imagine. And one of my friends there who runs the Mastic Society said to me, if we could keep them, we would. There's been, and also in Greece, and particularly in the islands, there is still a memory of the 1.5 million refugees who fled Turkey in 1923 and who came through the islands. So, and there are a lot of people on the islands descended from those refugees. So, and for reasons, I think those are the basic reasons. There's not the hostility towards the refugees that you've seen in the rest of Europe. It's very much, if we could keep them, we would. There's no particular fear that these are, you know, terrorists coming to overturn the country. They've been refugees. They have a history of refugees. So they've seen them before. And as I say, the saddest part is this is the society in in Syria and the society in Iraq have been hollowed out by the conflicts. And what's left frequently is the power structures and the people who are too poor or otherwise unable to leave the country.
Right.
Most of the refugees coming off have money. They speak a second language, English or French. They have still got their cell phones working with them. Everything is. These are really very, very high quality people, and if the Europeans had a little bit of brains, they would realize that this is the best possible input into their own continent.
Well, look at our country.
Yeah, I mean, it's who we are.
That's who we are.
But the damage it's leaving behind it in Syria and Iraq is really inestimable. This is literally 5 million of the best people in Syria have left the country. 5 or 6 million of the best people in Iraq have left the country.
So talk about a brain drain.
Brain drain, society, culture. These are people who didn't really care what your religion was. We lived in Damascus for 4 years. This was as secular a modern Mediterranean city as any place I've ever lived, and that's gone.
Right.
And I don't know how you get them to come back. And if the fighting doesn't stop, these kids are going to put down roots in Europe or elsewhere, and
I'll never get them back.
And never be coming back.
What population of them are Christians?
The numbers and the reality have never really kept track with each other.
Right.
But I would say that in terms of Syrian passport holders, probably 14% Christian. Now, a large number of those had already left but continue to hold Syrian passports.
I see.
So in reality, I'd say before 2010, I'd say probably this Christian population of Syria was about 8 or 9%.
Oh, that's good. And I know you're from Theros,
You're right.
which is near the Turkish
coast, yeah.
coast there. A lot did go through Theros.
Yeah. Right now, there's about 5,000 left on Theros.
There are. So
Yeah.
they come through Turkey and then through Theros to Theros?
They come from Turkey to the 4 islands that are closest to
Which are,
Chios, Lesbos, Samos, and Kos.
right.
And they've those islands, basically 1 million people have passed through those islands.
And then where do they go? Up the east to
Well, at that point, it sort of becomes chaotic. They were trying, population of Chios is 50,000.
Right.
So you've got 5,000 there now, and 150,000 passed through there, 200,000 passed through there last year. So they've moved them to the mainland, and that's where that part moved, not smoothly, but manageably. But once they got to the mainland is where it fell apart, because essentially the Greek system was totally overwhelmed, because remember, it hit, unfortunately, in the middle of a huge economic crisis.
Right.
So the Greek system, to accommodate the refugee and manage the refugee flow, just fell apart.
Right.
And so I don't think they registered more than 10 or 20% of the refugees. These people kept on going. And then they closed the land borders north of Greece. They've all been closed, so but a lot of them got through there before the borders were closed, and then they've closed the borders behind them. The Europeans have agreed to take 60,000 refugees, 160,000 refugees from Greece, and distribute throughout Europe, and most of the countries have balked and said, no, we're not going to do it.
Right.
They've not sent they've promised that they would send, I don't know how many millions of dollars to handle, and there's supposed to be 600 European border guards sent to Greece to supplement the
And
Greek.
they have not done so?
Over only 60 of the 160 that
Wow, what a
have shown
tragedy.
up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
It is a major tragedy.
it's a major tragedy. Well, on that note, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more what we can be doing.
Yeah.
You're watching The Next Word. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Welcome back. We're having a conversation tonight with Lena Alfi, Director of the Middle East Children's Institute, as well as Ambassador Patrick Theros, who spent the better part of his career in the Middle East. Lena, I know you have a great fond love for Syria, and you've been living it through the children that you're helping every day through the Institute. But what is it truly like, these children, they're going through, what they're going through? I mean, it must be, it's just unimaginable, certainly to people like myself, or to any of us really in this country.
So I think I'll tell you a story about a young boy who's in one of our programs. His name is Sultan, and he's a Syrian boy. And in 2011, the village that his family lived in Syria came under attack. So he couldn't go to school anymore because it was unsafe for him to leave the house. So you have children who are not going to school, who are staying at home, who are not interacting with other children, who are hearing bombs constantly, who are knowing that there are others that are dying out there. And so his parents made the very difficult decision to try to leave so that their children could have a better life. And I think what most people don't know is that many Syrians who have become refugees try to make it work in Syria before. I mean, they moved to different villages and neighboring towns in Syria to try to live there before making the difficult decision of saying, okay, well, let's leave the country and become a refugee. And so his parents did try to live in other places, and the same thing was happening. And so in 2012, they made the decision to move to Jordan. And so they went and settled in Jordan. Now, this whole time, Sultan has been out of school because he was out of school before, and then he's trying to find a new life, and the family's moving, and then they finally settled in Jordan. And then once they've settled in Jordan, they have to worry about things like paying for rent and finding, regularity and figuring out where they are and getting their refugee status. And there's a whole list of bureaucracy that they have to go through. So Sultan was out of school for 4 years. And so you have 700,000 Syrian refugee children, just like Sultan, who are out of school. And some have been out of school for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. Now we're coming up to 6 years, where some children might have been out of school. Some might have never gone to school. So just to think about what that does on a child's development of not having any sense of routine, any sense of a place to go, any place where there's comfort for them, where they're with their peers, where they're learning, I mean, it kind of throws everything off, and it lags their development in so many ways. So what the Middle East Children's Institute is doing is we are working in Jordan, and we are actually finding these children who have lost years out of school, and we provide them with a catch-up program. So we actually give them the opportunity to catch up on the years that they've lost. And Jordan has been so generous to allow Syrian refugee children to enter public school. But you have so many children who have lost so many years that they can't just go to school, because you might have a child who should be in 4th grade in a classroom with 1st graders. Right. And that just doesn't work. So we work with these children to get them caught up to the grade that they should be in. So we found Sultan, and we have tremendous teacher training programs. So our teachers are trained really in knowing how to deal with children who might have trauma, deal with children who are might not know how to hold a pencil, might not know how to read or write or recognize letters, and really get them going and catch them up to the grade that they should be. And so Sultan was able to catch up through our program and then transition out of our program and into public school so that he can continue his education. But there are hundreds of thousands of other children that we still need to reach, that other organizations are trying to reach, just to get them back on track.
I know, I mean, it's just, it's mind-boggling. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I look at even the kids here, in certainly our inner city, and I mean, these I've always advocated for safe havens after school, because truly I've seen it where they've flourished, and oh my God, I just thank you. All I can say is thank you. And Patrick, I mean, you've lived there, and you've seen all.
No, but being a refugee is measurably different than anything else, because your life has now been turned upside down. You have, again, talking about Chios, last year I was talking to when the refugees were at their height. I was talking to the mayor, and he said, there are kids there, and their parents are trying to keep the kids under control. We thought about, seeing something, providing children's programs. They used tried using the local schools in the afternoon. Started looking for teachers among the refugees themselves, and they could just at least have something that resembles a school. But they were simply overwhelmed. They didn't have the resources. Where are you going to get books? No Arabic books. A few kids actually, some people just took them into the regular, very young kids, took them into Greek kindergartens just because it's better to have them there than wandering around. But it's these are going to be very tough kids, and if they don't settle soon someplace, it doesn't matter where they settle, but if
Right.
they don't settle soon someplace, you're going to have problems off into the future.
Right.
And it's going to be problems for them, and it's going to be problems for the societies in
Right.
which they're settling. So you've got to do something about this, and unfortunately, to give the Germans credit, they're the only ones that seem to be trying very hard.
They are. I mean, the Denmark, did they just close the doors?
Well, Denmark actually has done something that I think is truly bizarre. They're forcing the refugees to give, they're providing services, but then they're taking all the jewelry away from the refugees, and their watches and cameras and phones. And come on, spare me. This is
No.
about as bizarre.
So Denmark, and I mean, you got certainly Germany. Germany is.
The Germans are trying.
They really are trying.
Yeah.
French and
French to a degree are.
right? The Belgium and
I don't know. The only countries that know something about are Germany. The Austrians are trying. The Eastern European, the Poles, the Hungarians, all the rest have just closed their borders and said we're not taking anybody. The British are doing well by the kids that actually get there, but there just aren't a lot getting there to Britain.
they're not. Why? It's just because it's
Just hard to do.
It's difficult to get there. You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's still, and also in France, you have the problem of a lot of migrant workers and refugees coming from North Africa, or non-Arabic speaking, coming out of different societies altogether. And I really don't know how the French are dealing with this. Italians just as well. They, at least there, they have the advantage that these are bigger and richer countries, but still, it's a problem for them.
Well, what a
And
it's a
huge
disaster.
tragedy. Yeah.
So, of the proportion that have left from Syria, going back to that, what are you talking like 15%, 20% have fled
5 million people have been displaced in Syria.
in a country of
20 million?
20 million?
Or
Okay.
something like 20 million, that'd be about right.
Wow, a fourth.
A fourth of the population has been displaced. I don't know what the numbers are, but the largest single group has gone to Jordan. There are probably 2 million Syrians and 1.5 million to 2 million Syrians in Jordan. Probably more Iraq. There's 2 million refugees in Turkey. I'd say the majority of them are Iraqis rather than
Right.
Syrians. 500,000 perhaps have gone to Lebanon, 500,000 to 1 million. There too, this is a country that just doesn't have the resources to manage. Plus they have their own internal problems, which
Right.
the refugees exacerbate. And about 1 million have ended up in Europe. Of that 1 million, I'd say about 2/3 are Syrian, and about 1/3 are Iraqis, Afghans, and others. But it's it is not that big a problem if you could overcome, in my view, the political problems that politicians are generating in Europe. All of Europe together before the Brits leave is 540 million people. And yeah, 1 million people are a lot, but in a population of 540 million, the 540 million richest people in the world, you ought to be able to take care of 1 million people, most of whom have educations, and most of whom speak at least one European language.
So speaking of languages, you speak Arabic, Spanish,
Greek,
and Greek,
and English occasionally.
and English occasionally.
Right.
It's impressive.
No, it's not.
English.
Yeah.
Well, Arabic I would think would be very difficult.
Arabic's a hard language to learn.
It's a very
She
hard
cheated.
language.
She
cheated. How did you? Because she had already a built-in.
Her Arabic's like my Greek. Our mothers forced us to do it.
Exactly.
Mother's force, right?
Exactly.
Right, Lena. And you, of course, know Arabic. And,
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and you learned it by
It was first language.
first language.
Actually, my mother predominantly spoke Arabic, and my dad predominantly spoke English. So I had a good balance at home.
And they both immigrated.
Yeah. My father was much younger. He came when he was about 12, 13. My mother came when she was about 25.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So they did come at different times and brought a little bit different proportions of their culture. I think my the Syrian culture was very present in our house. And my grandparents came from Syria later on, and so they were there, and we had a wonderful influence.
It's great to grow up in a multicultural.
It really is.
Oh,
It's
wow.
really a blessing.
And you've come here, and you've made this place. You've made Washington D.C. area
Home, yeah.
your home, and
I do. I love Washington. I love meeting people from so many different countries and hearing so many different languages all the time. And you know, for the most part, everybody in Washington, maybe outside of the Hill, gets along really well. I mean, on the streets,
Really?
everyone is so friendly and kind to each other, and it's a beautiful thing to see, I think.
Now, are you getting, as the press reports come out, more media attention? Of course, we've seen it every day for the last year. Do you get financial support from the community?
We do. We have wonderful supporters in Washington, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Europe, a wonderful community in Europe that helps support us. We work in partnerships predominantly, so our
I saw
programs,
that, yeah.
so our programs in Jordan, we work in partnership with UNICEF
Right,
and
right.
with the Malala Fund, so part of our funding comes from there, and the other part comes from donations, and all of our overhead is covered by private donations, so we have this
Really?
wonderful, unique model where every donation that we get goes straight to our program costs, to buying books, to paying for student transportation, to training teachers, so we have a very unique model in that way, and you know, we work in partnership with the Ministry of Education in Jordan. So they've actually allowed us to use their public school spaces. We're the only NGO that's allowed to do so.
Wow.
So we're not building schools, we're not buying desks, we're using the existing resources, so we're able to scale up quite quickly, and now we're working in 23 schools in Jordan.
It's a phenomenal.
Yeah, reaching
So
about
if anybody
6,000.
wanted to donate or to help or to, can they get in contact? Tell
Yes,
us your-
please. Our website is www.mecinstitute.org. Costs about $300 to sponsor a child for a year. That covers their
Wow.
entire education. And this is really, like I said, for children in Jordan, this is Syrian refugee children and other Jordanian children, and it's to catch them up to the grade that they need to be in. And it really is to give them a second chance at an education and at a life in school and not elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely. It's just great, isn't it? I mean, where's your office? They're in D.C.
Our office is in DuPont. It's in
Right.
DuPont
But
Circle.
you
and
literally you're running the whole.
yeah, and I'm all over the place. So I go from place to place and speak about this and try to find new partners and work with our donors and, you know, design really wonderful customized education programs.
Oh, that's great. Well, you've both been very instructional, very informative, and we need to be talking more about this. So I'm really grateful that you took the time
Okay.
to be with us tonight.
It was very
Patrick,
enjoyable. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. You got to come back.
I would love to. Thanks for
So
having
I'm
me.
going to have you back, but thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay.
You've been watching The Next Word. Thank you. Have a great night.